Welcome to Get Serious. Wanted to give you all an update on that Sage Mode AI project that I had remarked on over the last couple weeks. So I'm nearly done with the initial version of this. It'll be ready by tomorrow. It's taken me a longer time to get this ready, but an ambitious project. And to recap for those who aren't familiar, so I really wanted to create, to take even a step back, just using AI everywhere within our business. Some of the most impactful AI usage that I've had personally is just, utilizing it as a thought partner, especially for trickier decisions or mental frameworks to consider. Almost like having a pocket board member, especially the way you might program your personal AI on how you might like to be answered. And to me, I created to be a bit more harsh and brutal in its assessments, like a high performing entrepreneur, just like leave it to me or give it to me as cutting and raw as necessary here, which I think is also a good compensation for the general obsequiousness of AI, meaning that it, is more eager to please in general. So trying to give it a little bit more of a sharper tone to cut closer to the truth is generally more beneficial in my experience. And so what I wanted to do is, the initial inception was like, okay, most of us, are ultimately our own best coaches, so long as we actually follow our own advice. Sometimes you might need to hear it from others here, but generally, like, you have the tools to figure out what you need to do if you actually just take the time to ask yourself it, consider it, and put it into motion. And so I wanted to build an AI project that had my quote unquote higher self, my sage self, so to speak, answering tons of different questions across, business, life, etc., so that I would have a backlog of my own frameworks across life that I could just reference and, discuss within a Claude project, mainly within a speaking format. Like I don't necessarily want, we'll see how it is in practice, but I more wanted to have conversations with this project even on a daily basis, or considering more difficult scenarios versus just typing into the AI project. And additionally, beyond my own answers, like, I would have my business partners answers, not the full 100+ questions that I've been doing personally, but mainly related to the business. Then I have a whole bunch of YouTube transcripts and mastermind notes and quotes that are more relevant to just general mindset and also business principles. And there's probably going to be some overlap with this project with other projects that I've built to answer certain questions here. Fortunately, that's the thing with AI. Sometimes, like, spending all this time on building up one project can have compounding effects for others, and it's just experimental in general. So that was the overall impetus here, and I got a lot of the parts done. Naturally, you always procrastinate, or at least I do. But I think a lot of people can relate. To save the hardest parts for last within a project. So it was easier for me to put together, YouTube transcripts and, compile some notes from masterminds, quotes, and so forth. That was just easier to upload in the project. But to actually go through the extensive process of answering a whole bunch of questions that I really asked Claude to, create a ton of different questions oriented around this project. So it would cover, like, basically every domain within life, or the vast majority of them that might have, like, more of a bent toward wisdom and practical advice. That was really the goal here. And so, I have one more batch to do. It's taken me quite a while to get through these because, like, if you really want to build the best possible project, like, that's the thing. Like, AI, when it works properly, can be life-changing and business-changing when you start to implement the systems. But to get the best results possible, like, you usually still have to do a lot of legwork. So, inputting the correct amount of knowledge is just critical in order for you to get the project to actually work as intended. So, I thought answering these questions like might be a couple day process, but it has been far longer than that because again, if you, some of these questions are like super in depth or you could answer them, very in depth. And so, if I want the best possible, sage mode project, like I need to take the time to answer these effectively. And there's like minimal overlap between them as well. So like I'm finished 99 questions so far, and on the last batch there's like another 15 or so, roughly. And so then I would be finally ready to start testing this thing out. But to give you an idea here on what those questions look like, it was split over 6 domains, but they actually broke it down into like 8 different batches here. So the first batch, it went more business oriented, and then, it took steps back to more like, abstract wisdom. So first it was more on the core business operating system, my decision-making strategy. Like an example question is, describe a time when you made a difficult business decision that turned out brilliantly. What was your thought process and what principles guided you? Like, it's not necessarily a question that you can answer within 1 or 2 sentences, right? Like, you really got to break this down. Or I guess you could answer it shorter, but again, to actually like work through this and get the best project knowledge possible, like you should really write this out. And like, again, but since been using Whisperflow over the last quarter, maybe a little bit more than that, it's just so much easier to do because it's basically transcribing as I'm speaking here. If I had to type this out, like I probably would have done like 10 questions so far. It would just been so much slower. Or you could just use, a voice memo and then have to transcribe later, but the accuracy might be a bit off. So like Whisperflow, if you are not using that, like I basically never type anymore. It's so much more effective. Emails, text communications, prompting, especially for AI, it's key. So it allowed me to go way, way more in depth. And then the next batch was deal evaluation and market positioning. That was a lot, related to what we're doing within the land business and land pricer. And then it oriented more around the personal operating system, peak performance, like what's your weekly rhythm for maintaining peak performance across multiple businesses? How do you structure your weeks? Like, again, to answer that in depth, like it takes some real concentration, like some deep work to answer these questions appropriately. And I got a lot of insights doing these. Like I'm actually going to have a lot of different podcasts going over this because, answering these questions actually helped me realize and create new frameworks that I hadn't necessarily had in mind before, or I hadn't articulated. Because if you have to answer some of these questions, it forces you to figure out, okay, how do you actually feel about these subjects? And if I find myself more, repeating certain frameworks and ways of thinking, it's like, that's also a trigger for me to realize, hey, this line of thinking is probably more important to you and a more consistent through line versus, other ideas that, might be batted around in your mind a little bit, but when it actually counts and when you're trying to answer as truthfully as possible. And I've done this over multiple days too. So like different moods. And so, but again, I try to do it when I'm high energy, right? Because it's, 10 out of 10 self answering. So, I didn't want to slack on any of these questions either. And then it went into relationships and communication mastery, such as, describe your approach to building genuine relationships with high value contacts, for example, investors, partners, mentors, without being transactional. So again, like not, yes or no questions, right? You really got to think through how to answer this. And then it went into health and vitality mastery. So a lot on like, physical fitness, mental fitness as well. That was actually probably the easiest to answer. I'm like probably the most locked in from a lot of these and answer these questions a lot. Probably one of the more consistent areas of my life. And then it went into, and just an example of one of those, like, how do you maintain physical health and energy during intense business periods without letting it slide? And so like generally I have a pretty good framework for that. And then the next batch was financial and wealth philosophy. For example, what's your philosophy on debt and leverage, both personally and in your businesses? And like sometimes when I was answering that, like especially a question like that, starting to backtrack a little bit and realize maybe I don't have the best answer to this particular question. So that's the thing, is like you can always come back and edit this as you grow as a person, and just have different strategies across the course of your career here. But like, again, the point of some of these questions are like, start delineating, okay, what's your real truths here, and how are you actually taking action within, some of these pieces of life that, because I definitely have levered up and I definitely use equity, but like, what's my strategy? And more comfortable from the personal side or from the business side? And what's your track record of doing that? So, again, answering some of these questions realistically, like it takes a lot of work. And then the next batch was purpose and legacy. So I just finished this one. This was batch 7. So again, like pretty deep stuff. Like, how do you think about concepts like destiny, luck, and personal responsibility in your success? Like this batch, or, how do you want to be remembered? What legacy do you want to leave behind? What's your 20-year vision for the impact you want to have in the world through your businesses and beyond? Like really forcing you to boil it down, what you're working for, and put it into words. Like we sometimes might have more nebulous goals or what we think we want, but when you actually have to note it all down, it forces a certain consolidation of thoughts. So that was, really deep. And I feel like this batch might even be the most valuable out of all of them, just in terms of reorienting, okay, what is your purpose? What are you going for on a day-to-day basis, especially from a thought partner perspective? Because we get lost in the weeds so often that what is going to bring us back to what our true north is. And then the last batch that I have to answer is just a mentor integration and frameworks. So it's like, if I had a couple of core mentors, either people I know personally or not, like Hormozy or Trevor McGregor or Andrew Lee, for instance, how am I incorporating their frameworks and advice within my life? And I also have different project knowledge within the project that is based around their own frameworks. So like creating this additional piece of project knowledge on how I utilize it within my personal frameworks is just another callback for how the AI would relate to me on those various subjects. So like Claude, this is an excellent job, like almost 115 questions, really, really in depth, pretty much nothing repetitive or nothing that I felt was pretty irrelevant for suggestions here. And then it's all going to go into the project knowledge. And then we'll be off to the races and being able to share more on how this is actually being implemented. But even if I never used this project, or just was kind of a dud and didn't work as I intended it to be, which I find to be far-fetched, like this was a very helpful exercise for orienting around, okay, getting clarity on so many parts of my life and my business, so that I readily have these answers in mind, even if I'm not necessarily consulting them again. But have it all written down, and within Notion for ready consultation as needed. So by itself, it was just a very helpful exercise. And if you haven't done something like this, I know there's a lot of like journal prompting effectively. Like it's a really hardcore project. It took me a long time to do almost all of this, but very worth it to gain that clarity within your life. So I'll be doing some other podcasts about this, just for some of these other breakthroughs of questions that really made me think and create other new frameworks here. So we'll get back to that, but we'll go ahead and wrap this one up today. SeriousLand.capital for any of your funding needs, Land Daily Diligence Facebook group for zero cost review of your land deals, and landpricer.ai for the most reliable land pricing tool on the market. We're going to have it ready for testing by the end of this week. I was just getting my last kind of product updates assigned to my engineering team yesterday. So rolling on that. I really can't wait to use this in my own business ASAP here. Like every time I'm reviewing a property now, it's like, man, I'd rather have Land Pricer to do this than just losing sight of what I'm trying to do. So subscribe and share. Catch you all next time. Take care, everybody. Bye.